Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome to the Aliyah Day. Today we're talking about contracts, lies, or goats rather, and lies. So interesting, a little bit about Messiah ben Yosef, some allusions to Messiah ben Yosef with respect to the birth of Yosef, which actually occurred in the last Aliyah. But today we have a discussion of Laban's treachery, of Yaakov making a contract with Laban. We're going to see that contract gets changed by Laban multiple times. And then we have this very peculiar story of goats and sheep and mating in front of certain types of sticks, and then being born to certain colors. And you know, it's interesting, that type of thing. And then, of course, the lies part is Laban lying, and then Jacob and his wives needing now to flee. Interestingly, you know, we to bring out a little bit of psychology, as we often do here on the program. As you all know, I am a self-trained and highly experienced and eminently a professional psychiatrist. In addition to a rabbi, I am actually Dr. Rabbi. My psychology degree has been earned, or as we say in French, earned. And so, in any case, we like to discuss psychological issues here. A lot of what we say, or excuse me, the phrase I use, pardon me, a lot of times is that oftentimes it is psychology and not theology. You know. This is so much the case very often. You know, as an aside, I was having a conversation yesterday online. This happened to be a Facebook conversation with a Christian gentleman, and we were just chatting back and forth, kind of giving our philosophy. And I always find it interesting how, you know, in Christianity, we were talking, the subject matter had to do with the name of the Messiah, but more importantly, the nature of the Messiah. That was kind of the context of the conversation. But when we got into the name of the Messiah part, I heard the common refrain. This reminded me of the psychology part. That on the one hand, Christianity is very, you know, commonly like you have to believe in the name, you know. And of course they say Jesus, you know, the name, and you know, there's one name. If you have to call upon this name, etc. And then when you bring up the name issue, like, well, his name actually is Yeshua, it's very much a shoulder shrug, like, it doesn't matter what you call him, doesn't really matter. And this particular gentleman said something very interesting, which I thought was first time I've heard this, which kind of like disagrees with me, but then agrees with me. He said, well, when Paul said there's only one name, he was talking about the person, not necessarily the name, which I told him as a theologian, as a trained theologian, and that is, I am a trained theologian, that interpretation of Paul's message is his alone. Like no one's ever said, it's talking about the person, the name doesn't matter. You're not going to read that in theological seminary commentaries about Paul, like I promise you. But anyway, that doesn't matter. But what was interesting about that conversation, when I said, you know, you're right, the person of the Messiah matters a lot. But anyway, enough about that. It was just interesting because it reminded me of the psychology. So going back to the psychology here, on this program, we talk about narcissism a lot because unfortunately it's so prevalent. And remember why it's so prevalent. Lay down on the couch and take deep breaths. The reason it's so prevalent is because self-esteem is such an issue. And we've done lots of things in our culture, ladies and gentlemen, to damage self-esteem. Can I give you an example? Do you know how we damage little children's self-esteem and they grew up to be little children in adult bodies? One way we did that was to give all the little kids a trophy or ribbon when they actually lost the event, but we gave them the ribbon as if they had won. participation trophy or whatever that. But the point is that no matter what, win or lose, we gave them a trophy because we're like, we want to help their self-esteem and let them know that even if they lost the race, they still won. And so we thought that was really cool to give little Johnny and little Susie trophies when they lost. That was really bad. You say, Rabbi, are you really a psychiatrist? Because what you're saying right now sounds kind of crazy. Well, most psychiatrists are crazy, but putting that aside, think it through. Little Johnny and little Susie get a trophy every time they lose, but that's not how the adult world works, is it? No. You don't get a trophy as an adult when you lose. And so what ends up happening is we train little Johnny and little Susie to be entitled, to be victims. I didn't losing wasn't my fault. I still need my trophy. I'm entitled to my trophy. So they grew up and it actually hurt their self-esteem. When they came into the adult world, they became narcissists. Why? Because in the adult world, no one was running around patting them on the head saying, you're so awesome. But they wanted to be awesome. And they felt like they needed to be awesome all the time, even if they lost. In other words, they didn't know how to deal with failure. And as a result, they became narcissists. So you see, you're welcome. So going back to Laban, so I'm like, oh, Rabbi, how does this relate to our Torah portion? You're such a nut. The way it relates to our Torah portion is that in the end of all this, we're going to see Laban show up and blame Jacob for everything in typical narcissistic fashion. The narcissist comes along and creates a mess, just destroys everything, messes everything up, is a complete, he's the problem or she's the problem. And then he or she wants to turn around and blame you. Why? Because he didn't get a trophy for losing. Because he's the perpetual victim or she's the perpetual victim. Let me just say they are the perpetual victim. They are the self-esteem issues. And if there is a mistake, if there is a problem, if there is an issue, it is your fault, never theirs. You're welcome. This session is free. You can get off the couch now. We're going to go to the Aliyah. Good morning, Kim. Glad you're here. Good morning, Peaches, formerly from Georgia. Glad you're here. Russ and Jen, Boker Tov to you. Glenn, good morning. Keturah is today your anniversary, or was it yesterday, or is it tomorrow? I forgot. But I know you didn't forget. And I know that Zake and Rayford didn't forget. But in any case, happy anniversary to you and Zake and Rayford. They are presently in an undisclosed location celebrating their anniversary. Good morning, Sergio. Good to see you, sir. Milka, good morning. Hope you and Zara and Daniel are doing great. Good morning to Ahava. Good morning, Seth. Hope you and Sonia are doing fantastic. And all of Sonia's coworkers who someday will be chiming in and interacting. So Baruch HaShem. Who else do we have here? Samuel, good morning, sir. Good morning, Jubilee. Good to see you. Let's see. Zake and Yigal, Boker Tov. Hepzibah, Boker Tov to you. Ariela Rafaela, good to see you. Crystal is watching on Facebook. Good to see you. And David White, good morning, sir. Chanel from beautiful Cincinnati, Ohio. Good to see you. Alita, good morning. Amita, Boker Tov to you. Hope you and Pinkus are doing great. Chris and Crystal and all of your fam, good morning to you. Nellie Grace, Boker Tov. Leah, good morning to you. Hope you and Eliezer are doing great. Lantern Lights, Boker Tov. Shoshana Brenner, good morning to you. And who else do we have? Johan, Boker Tov. Glad to see you, sir. Laurie, good morning. 67 VGM. You might be a new viewer, and if that is the case, good morning. Atara, Boker Tov. John, Boker Tov. Ellie, hope you and Joseph are doing fantastic. There's the rabbit scene, the little butterfly. Sarah Merritt, good morning to you and to Shane. I hope you're doing great. Tell Shane to go by HEB and consume a kosher hamburger in my, with me and my, channel it. Good morning, Ahava. Good morning, Makaya. Good to see you. Kriston, Boker Tov. Aliyah, good morning to you. Atara at the salon. Baruch HaShem. Well, everybody at the salon with Atara who are there beautifying people's heads with respect to their hair. Good morning. Glad to see you and welcome to the program. Good morning to you, Jeff White. Good to see you, sir. Marley, good morning. Who else do we have? Lamont, good morning to you. Heather Miller, Boker Tov. Good morning, Levi. Good to see you. You know, when I was a kid, you got a trophy if you won. And we were bullied and we liked it. Well, not really, but anyway, it's kind of funny. Good morning to Zake and Rayford. Happy anniversary to you, Zake and Rayford. And who else do we have? Did I miss anybody? Andrew De Leon, good morning. And glad that you are here. All right, 67 VGM has been here a few times. Well, Baruch HaShem. Laura from Pennsylvania. All right, good morning, Laura. Glad you're here. All right, awesome. We are here. Psychology session has been attended to. This is part of the Lapid Judaism University. When you graduate from the Lapid Judaism University, first of all, you can speak English. Secondly, you not only get a degree in Torah, but you also get a master's degree in psychiatry, and therefore you can be a non-certified illegal therapist, which is what we specialize in. So anyway, let's go to our insights here and look at a couple of things related to the birth of Yosef, because there are some comments made here by Mam Loez with respect to Yosef that really portend toward the Messiah ben Yosef. Okay. So it says, God remembered Rachel. God heard her prayer and opened her womb. This is part of the last Aliyah, but it has to do with the Dudaim. And then she took the Dudaim and she was eventually got pregnant with Yosef. So it says here on Rosh Hashanah, okay, on Rosh Hashanah, it was decreed in the heavenly academy that Rachel's prayer be answered. An order was given that she have children in the merit of Abraham and Jacob, as well as in the merit of the prayers that Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah had said for her. Rachel also had her own merit for giving Leah her secret sign with Jacob and sparing her humiliation. Although she knew that Leah would be substituted, she remained silent, and Jacob had sent Rachel gifts at that time, but Laban gave them to Leah, telling her, "These are the gifts that your bridegroom sent you." And Rachel acted as if she did not know anything, and her only complaint was, "What reason could my father have for hating Jacob and keeping such a saint from me?" So what's interesting here is that it goes on to talk about how she basically gave birth to Yosef on Rosh Hashanah. And the reason I find that interesting is because we will learn later in the insights that when Yosef is brought to Pharaoh and in order to interpret his dreams, and then subsequently becomes the viceroy of Egypt, essentially the king of Egypt for all intents and purposes, that also occurred on Rosh Hashanah. We also believe, many people believe, that Messiah was born during this season. Some believe he was born during Rosh Hashanah. Some believe he might have been born during Sukkot. But in any case, it was within that 15-day period, somewhere around there. If we suggest that Messiah was born on Rosh Hashanah, then this definitely fits a pattern, because the Messiah ben Yosef was brought forth on Rosh Hashanah, on his birthday, and he began to reign. And Judaism teaches and believes that the Moshiach, may he come soon, may he return soon, will bring about the resurrection of the dead, and that event will occur on Rosh Hashanah. So I wanted to point this out as well. So it goes on to say in the commentary of Mamloez, Rachel became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She said, God has gathered in Asaph my humiliation. She named him Yosef, saying, may God add on Yosef for me another son. So another allusion here to Messiah ben Yosef and what the Moshiach ben Yosef is supposed to do. Okay. And good morning, by the way, to my sister-in-law on Facebook, Lourdes Luna. Good morning to you, and I'm glad you're here, sis. So it says here, Joseph or Yosef in Hebrew comes from the root Yasaf, which means gather. So what's interesting here is that this is an allusion to the Messiah ben Yosef, the suffering Messiah. And part of the suffering Messiah's job, if you will, mission, that's probably a better way to put it. His mission is to gather in. Good morning, Chase, and good morning, Cohen. Thanks you guys for being here. And Anthony as well, Baruch HaShem. And Curious Comics for that matter. Good morning. So if you think about that, what the suffering Messiah comes and he suffers and dies. And then, of course, we go into exile. Now, the Messiah taught this. That's why the Moshiach said, foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What he was saying when he mentioned that was that he was going to go into exile, and anyone who was going to follow him would naturally go into exile. Now, there's an interesting teaching in Kabbalistic concepts related to Gelut, which is the exile. I was just reading more about it last night, and to make a very long discussion, hopefully very short, in the Kabbalistic idea in Gelut, the shards of holiness have been lost into exile. That's why we search for holy sparks. That's why non-Jews, some of them, hopefully, most of them, hopefully all of them, are holy sparks. But anyway, what has also been lost in exile, very interestingly, according to Kabbalistic ideas, mystical Judaism, is in fact the Shekinah. The Shekinah is in exile along with us. In fact, when we find these holy sparks and we bring them into covenant, or at the very least, bring them into a knowledge of God, then we are, as it were, rescuing the shards of the Shekinah. But the point, in fact, is, and this is that whole thing requires a much longer and interesting discussion. But the point is that the Shekinah is in exile with us. That's what Kabbalistic mystical Judaism teaches. Now, you might ask the question, and rightfully so, and this brings us back to the reality of Messiah. The Shekinah is God. In fact, the Shekinah is the divine presence manifest in a terrestrial universe. So how can God be in exile when he, in fact, is existence? God is omnipresent. Therefore, how can he be captured, as it were, into exile? And that's a very good question. And the answer is, yeah. I don't mean to be flippant. Good morning, Cindy. Good to see you. Hope you and Tony are doing great. I don't mean to be flippant by that, but what I'm trying to tell you is that there is this very mystical concept. So the question is, how can Yeshua be who is Yeshua, by the way? Well, Yeshua is the Shekinah manifest in a physical form, a human form, which is what Memtet is. So a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around that. And I've heard you say incorrectly that since we believe that, then we're idolaters because we've created two gods. That's not true. That's not even remotely true. I've heard other people who say, well, isn't that Trinitarianism? No. Let me ask you a question. In Kabbalistic mystical Judaism, the Shekinah is in exile with us, and yet God is omnipresent. So did Judaism create two gods? Has v'shalom. Is there a deity that's in exile with us, and yet a deity that's in, let's say heaven? Well, if you ask a Jew that question, like, no, you misunderstand. There's emanation. Exactly. That's called Yeshua, ladies and gentlemen. So you see, you can't move the goalpost. You can't say, well, over here in mystical Judaism, we have the Shekinah in exile with us, seemingly separate from God, but yet not. And over here in Lapid Judaism, they believe in that Messiah is the divine manifestation of the Shekinah, and that's just idolatry. That's Peril. That's Jejun. So, going back to the topic here, we have with the idea of the Shekinah being in exile with us, Yeshua said, if you follow me, you're going to go in exile. Why? Because he is the Shekinah. He's the Shekinah manifest. He's going to go into exile. Are you willing to go into in exile with Shekinah? That's exactly what happened to Joseph. Joseph went into exile. He was revealed. He began to be revealed on Rosh Hashanah. Now, notice, by the way, that's when he began to be revealed. His brothers did not believe in him still. And we're going to get into that topic because it's very interesting. But going back to the gathering in point that I was making with the name Yosef, the sages bring down that the reason we were cast into exile, aside from the fact that because of our sin, but besides for that, the main reason we were cast into exile is so that Jewish people would be in all areas of the world, introducing the universe, as it were, to the one true God. In other words, to put it another way, us being in exile is specifically for the purpose of gathering in the holy sparks, gathering in the non-Jews. Now, are you aware, because of what I just said, are you aware that this is why the Rebbe of Chabad never moved to Israel and never encouraged anybody else to do the same? Are you aware? Who was aware of that? Are you aware that the Rebbe of Chabad never visited Israel ever? Are you aware that he did not want to live there? And are you aware that he never encouraged anybody to live there? Do you know why? Do you know why? Anybody? Does this ring a bell with anybody? The reason he didn't is because he believed that the Moshiach was going to gather in the Jews to Israel. A lot of Hasidim believe this, by the way. That's why a lot of Hasidim, I don't know what the percentage was, but there was a significant portion of the Hasidim at the founding of Israel who were against the founding of Israel for this reason. Because they believed that the Jews would be gathered into Israel by the Moshiach, not by politics. So anyway, now since the state of Israel has been founded, they were supportive of Israel. But the point is that the Rebbe believed that the mission of Jews was to be in the Galut, in the exile, in order to collect the holy sparks. So it wasn't time yet, in other words, to go to Israel. That comes when the Mashiach ben David shows up. Now, of course, the Rebbe was principally interested in rescuing Jewish souls. And then in 1986, he started a campaign to kind of rescue non-Jewish souls through the invention of the Noahide movement, which is completely an invention. I wrote a book about it called The Noahide Deception. It's on Amazon. You should read it, please. But anyway, the whole point I'm trying to make is that going into exile is about gathering. Okay. So on the one hand, there are people that say we should move to Israel, we should go to Israel, we should populate Israel. And there's other Jews who say, well, that's really not our mission. Not yet. The Messiah will gather us into Israel. So there's different points of view. There's different types of ideas, okay, with respect to that. Okay. It is also interesting, by the way, because the sources, just to kind of sidestep a little bit, the sources indicate crystal clearly, okay, that the Messiah must be of the line of David and born in Bethlehem, okay, and then eventually appear from Galilee. This is not up for debate, okay. What's interesting to me is that the Rebbe of Chabad was not of the line of David. He was obviously not born in Bethlehem. And he did not appear from Galilee. And yet there are thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Jews who believe he's the Messiah. And so when you go to Israel today, there are big billboards all over Israel that have his picture, and it says in Hebrew, Melech HaMashiach. Okay? The King Messiah. Now, what's interesting, see, this is why I'm talking about moving the goalpost. There are people that tell us that Yeshua cannot be the Messiah. Why not? Because he didn't fulfill blah, 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 blah. And yet you have a person over here that is a plausible Messiah, according to them, who did not fulfill anything ever. No prerequisites, no requirements, nothing, not a zero, aside from the fact that they're Jewish and was a Torah scholar. But other than that, boom, nothing, zero. Does that strike you as odd? It does me. So life goes on in the idea, in the mind and heart of Jacob. He's working, he's doing his due diligence, and he's being taken advantage of. It says in the scripture that at the end of, where is this? Chapter 30. Yeah. It says here, where we go, Jacob's new deceit. Here it is, chapter 30, verse 27. But Laban said to him, right? So Jacob is trying to cut a deal. He's trying to figure out how, he says to Laban in verse 26, after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, grant me leave that I may go to my place and to my land. So remember, Jacob was just in, he had just come to get a wife. He had come to the bridal shop in Haran to pick out a bride and then, go home. He wasn't there to stay, but remember we talked about the fact he got robbed on the way. All of his stuff got taken. All of his credit cards, his American Express, traveler's checks, all of that was gone. And therefore, when he got to when he got to meet who he thought was going to be his wife, he had nothing with which to purchase her, right? So that's why he stayed all this time working for his father-in-law, because of that fact. So, but now he's saying, look, I need to go now. Okay. I need to go home. So in verse 26, he says, give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and I will go, for you are aware of my service that I labored for you. Thanks, Greg. I guess we don't use traveler's checks anymore. Kind of half kidding about that, but yeah, dating myself indeed. So he's saying, look, I've kept my end of the bargain here. You have not kept your end of the bargain. I need to go. So look at verse 27. It says, but Laban said to him, this is a narcissist alert here. There's something that narcissists do called love bombing. Once they get found out, and once you start to reject them because you realize that they're a narcissist, one of their key tricks is to start love bombing you. Oh, you know what? I've always thought you were awesome. You are so amazing. I just want you to know that I'm so supportive of you. You're the cream of the crop. And I just want to come at you and just talk and can we just sit down and have a conversation? So he says in verse 27, but Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes. Such a narcissist. Laban has been cheating this guy since day one. He swapped out wives with him. I mean, he's just been a complete deceiver. And then Laban says, love bomb alert, if I have found favor in your eyes. Look, Jack, you haven't found favor in my eyes. Every time I turn around, you're stabbing me in the back. If I have found favor in your eyes, I have learned, look what he goes on to say. I have learned by divination that HaShem has blessed me on account of you. I'm going to suggest to you something. It's a radical suggestion, I know. But if you have learned anything by divination, you probably are in a bad place. So if you're reading tea leaves to try to figure out what's going on, you're probably not doing well. You drive by and you see those signs for the palm readers and stuff. You see those? They're always in shacks, by the way, which is always a great sign. Here's, Clarissa, the palm reader. And the house looks like it's about to fall over. If you're such a great palm reader, why can't you figure out what's going on with your house? But, people go there. They want to know about their love life. They want to know about, whatever. They want to know about their next job. I don't want to know that. I want to know what the lottery numbers are. I want to go to Clarissa. I don't really want to go to Clarissa. But I want to go to Clarissa and say, Clarissa, first of all, fix the door. It's falling off. Secondly, Clarissa, what's the lottery numbers? I don't care. Tell me. And if we win, I'll give you a percentage so you can fix the house. It's a mess. So it says here in verse 20, and he said, specify your wage to me and I will give it. So how many of you know this is your life lesson number 50 today? How many of you know that you can't trust a liar? Raise your hand. If somebody has lied to you and lied to you and lied to you, how many of you know that trusting them a 50th time probably isn't a good idea? So he says, specify your wage to me and I'll give it to you. Well, first of all, I've already done this to you, Laban. I've specified my wage. I'm going to work for you for 7 years for Rachel. I work for you for 7 years and I get Leah. I mean, this guy's a con artist, but this is the contract that he keeps breaking. He says, but he said to him, you know how I served you and what your livestock were with me for the little that you've had before me. I came and have expanded substantially as HaShem blessed you with my coming. And now when I will also do something for my own house, I want my own blessing. Have you ever worked for anybody that, you were doing them a great job, but they never gave you like commensurate pay? They were just, allowing themselves to be blessed. It says here in the Mam Loez commentary that Laban changed his mind 10 times before finalizing any agreement with Jacob. Some even say 100 times. Every time they came to an agreement, Laban changed his mind. God, however, cares for his saints, and he made sure that Jacob was not going to work for without any kind of reward. But that's the life that Jacob lived with Laban. It was a constant changing, a constant moving of the. I've said this phrase several times in the last couple of days. A constant moving of the goalpost. I'm going to go back to the conversation I mentioned where I was talking to the gentleman about the name of the Messiah. When you say there's only one name under heaven whereby you must be saved, and then you say, okay, well, that's not the name though. And then they say, the name doesn't matter. Just use whatever name you want. God knows your heart. See, to me, that's a moving of the goalpost. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I believe in intellectual honesty when we're having conversations like these. And that means that we don't move the goalpost, that we have the conversation and we deal with that conversation, and we don't say, well, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. It does matter. But here in the world of Laban, he just constantly changed things. Why? Well, because it was all about Laban. It was all about his needs, his desires. A relationship requires, people to be committed on both ends of the spectrum. In our society, people oftentimes want people to be very committed to them, but they themselves don't want to be very committed. That's an unfortunate reality, and I regret to say that I've seen that way more often than I want to. That you find yourself deeply committed to people, and they are very superficially committed to you. Our goal as Jews who walk in Musar is not to be such a person. Okay. So it says, again, going back to Mam Loez, when he said, how I've worked for you and how your livestock have fared, this is in verse 29 and verse 30. The commentary says, I remember how many sheep you gave me to tend when I first came, and all you had only 70 sheep. Now you have a tremendous flock. Now I have to begin to worry about my household expenses, my sons scrambling among the shepherds. I mean, he's like, I got boys, I got kids. I need a new car. I've got to think about college funds. I'm making you rich, and meanwhile, I have nothing. They are allowed to shear enough wool to make some cloth, but that's about all I have to support my household. So he's saying to Laban, look, I need, I've got to get a cut here somehow. In verse 33, the Mam Loez says, in the future, let this demonstrate my honesty. My wages will pass in front of you. Any goat not spotted or streaked, and any sheep that is not brownish can be considered stolen if it's in my possession. So this is where he comes up with the goats and the sheep situation. It says here in verse 37 that Jacob took rods of fresh poplar, hazel, and chestnut. He peeled white stripes in them by uncovering the white in the rods. Jacob took fresh white wands of poplar. He also took rods of hazel and chestnut. In some places, he peeled them, and in other places, he left the bark, leaving them spotted and or striped. Okay, so the peeled portions were white, and the unpeeled portions were dark. It says in the scripture, he set up the rods that he had peeled near the throws, the watering receptacles to which the sheep came to drink, facing the sheep. They would mate when they came to drink. The sheep mated towards the rods, and the sheep gave birth to streaked, spotted, and ringed lambs. This was obviously a miracle. It says here, Jacob attached these wands to the places where the sheep would come to drink. Okay. In general, the lambs would have markings, the same markings that were found on the sticks themselves. It says in this section, 5 variations are mentioned: ringed, spotted, mottled, streaked, and brownish. It points out here in the commentary that sheep are usually white, while goats were generally dark. Okay. Hence the old adage of the black sheep of the family, meaning that you're the outlier. Ringed in Hebrew is akudim. Such animals had bands around their legs, while the rest of their body was white. Okay. So it says, due to these bands, they appeared to be bound. In Hebrew, akud means bound, which is the root of akeda. So the Akedah is called the Akedah because he had rings on his hands and on his feet, like the goat who was offered, if you will. So it talks about the spotted. They had black spots. The molten ones is the opposite of the other. That it had The animal has a black body with white spots looking like hail and so forth. It goes on to describe the sheep and so forth. It says Jacob had a regular procedure. When he wanted spotted lambs, he would whittle off many small pieces of white bark from the wands, leaving it with dark spots. When he wanted ring lambs, he would peel off strips of bark around on both ends of the wand. If he wanted blackish or reddish sheep, he would plant unpeeled bark wands near the watering troughs. Although Jacob made use of the wands, this was miraculous. Normally, a lamb resembles its parents. So that's the point here, of course, about these sheep and the goats rather than the wands and so forth, or sheep, goats, wands, is that it was all a miracle. This is all a miracle. So it says Jacob separated the lambs among Laban's flocks. He made the sheep face the ring ones and the brownish ones. He formed special flocks of his own. And he did not let them mingle with Laban's flocks. The lambs that were born striped and ringed, Jacob segregated and formed them into separate flocks. He had a ring flock precede the other sheep so that the sheep following would look at them. He did this to all of Laban's sheep. So Jacob's trying to be upright and honest here. And, Laban is not. Now, as we conclude, we'll get into more of this story tomorrow, of course. As we conclude in verse 31, or chapter 31, rather, Jacob is seeing that Laban is obviously, he's finally figured out he's not being honest. And so Jacob knows that the phone lines at the house are tapped. So he calls his wives out to the field to have a private conversation with them. God had spoken to Jacob at this juncture and said, "Return to the land of your fathers and your native land, and I will be with you." So it says in verse 4, Jacob sent and summoned Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock, and they said to his flocks, and he said to them, "I have noticed that your father's disposition is not towards me as it was in earlier days, but the God of my father was with me. Now you have known that it was with all my might that I served your father, yet your father mocked me and changed my ways." And Jacob reports 100 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he would stipulate speckled ones, that'll be your wage, then the entire flock would be speckled, etc., etc., etc. Ring ones, and that'll be your wage, the entire flock would be ringed. Thus God took away your father's livestock and gave them to me. If once happened at the mating time of the flock that I raised my eyes and saw in a dream, behold, the he-goats that mounted the flock were ringed, speckled, and checkered. And an angel of God said to me in the dream, "Jacob," and I said, "Here I am." And he said, "Raise your eyes, if you please, and see all the he-goats mounting the flocks and the ring, speckles, and checkered, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made me a vow. Now arise, leave this land, and return to your native land." So he's telling his wives, "Look, I got this message from God. I should leave." Then Rachel and Leah replied and said to him, "Have we then still a share and an inheritance in our father's house? Are we not considered by him as strangers? For he has sold us and even totally consumed our money." So the girls recognize our father is a liar. He's all in it for himself. And we're ready to go with you. Okay. So it says, "But all the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. So now whatever God has said to you, do." So Jacob arose, lifted his children and his wives on camels, and he led them all with his livestock and all his wealth which he had amassed, his purchased property which he had amassed in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac to the land of Canaan. And ladies, so here we have, they just got up and left. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, you just have to leave. You just have to go. You have to get away from certain type of people who are, the narcissists we talk about all the time. Of course, Laban's going to come along later, and he is going to blame Jacob for everything, which is, as I said, the typical pattern that we've been talking about with respect to narcissism. It's never their fault, and they are always the victim. They're the ones who got the trophy when they lost the race. End of our Aliyah today. Glad that you were able to join me. I hope this has been interesting and inspirational. We will be back tomorrow for more insights into the Aliyah, looking at this Jacob and his wives leaving, Laban pursuing them, and more about this topic. So God bless all of you. Look forward to hearing from you, or seeing you rather, tomorrow. Please like this video, share it with all of your friends, and we will look forward to seeing you mañana. Shalom Aleichem. Have a great and blessed day.